Good morning. This is RCB News, and I am Ryan Boland. Today, I want to talk about 10 myths concerning the Constitution of the United States of America. And I'm going to be reading from an excellent source of information entitled The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. It has 10 specific myths that are outlined in the back of this book. I'm going to be reading those myths, and I'm going to be expounding on them. Now, this will be a 3-part session. For first session will be, I will read 3 myths. The second session will be 3 myths. And then the third and final session will be 4 myths that I'm going to read and expound on. But suffice it to say, before I begin this discussion, is simply that our constitutional rights are under attack and have been under attack in this country for many, many years. And more Americans are failing to realize this attack and the intensity and deceptiveness of this attack. It is not just the Biden administration, or wasn't just the Obama administration or whatever administration. It goes back many, many years. It goes all the way back to the 40s under Franklin D. Roosevelt and others, So this has been going on a little bit over time. As time progressed on, more and more people's constitutional rights have been stripped from them. But unfortunately, many Americans don't know their constitutional rights, so they don't know how to defend them. And those that do, to some extent, know their constitutional rights don't understand the certain myths that have been spun to try to take away the power of those constitutional rights. Okay, so I'm going to be dealing in this first lesson, the first 3 myths concerning our constitutional rights. Myth number 1: the Constitution is old-fashioned. and this is interesting. The Constitution is old-fashioned. Some of you probably have heard this from either far leftist liberal politicians or liberal people in general, that the idea that Constitution is old-fashioned. Really? That's like saying the Bible is old-fashioned, but that's another story, and I digress. It says, we all wonder, is it old-fashioned? If so, the next question must be, which part? The Constitution controls the political powers that protect our rights. Listen to this. Now, it says the Constitution controls the political powers that protect our rights. Changing those privileges and constraints exposes our rights to political abuse and eventual destruction. So that's a myth. The Constitution is not old-fashioned, because in order for the Constitution to be old-fashioned, then protecting your rights or your human rights or civil rights are old-fashioned. Your human rights and civil rights and human rights that we basically were born with are not old-fashioned. That ideology or that reality is maintained throughout your entire life in every civil society. In fact, many people from other countries come here to this country because of the rights that we have, or the rights that we're free to express in this country. They don't have the rights. They don't have the privilege and benefit of expressing those rights in those countries. Here we do. So the idea that the Constitution is old-fashioned is a myth. Because if it's old-fashioned, it means your rights are old-fashioned, and that's just not true. Myth number 2: it's a living document. It must change. I've heard this many times over. I've actually literally purchased a civics book about a year ago, and it's a great book. It's a great book, civics book on how our government runs and so forth. It's a great book. But I was reading and I'm like, wait a minute, there's certain things in it that just didn't seem right to me. And back in them days, I wasn't as knowledgeable as I am now. And it made the statement that the Constitution is a living document. It must change. But as I said earlier, that's like saying the Bible, or rather I implied earlier, that's like saying the Bible is old-fashioned. It must change. But the Bible doesn't change because God doesn't change. So the principles in the Bible and the Word of God doesn't change because God doesn't change. Well, the same principle applies to the Constitution. The idea that it's a living document, it must change. You got to watch out when politicians say stuff like this. Let me read this. It says, we all wonder, shouldn't it, quote, change with the times? The power of the Constitution to protect human rights never depended on our culture, economics, technology, or world affairs. It stands apart to ensure that our rights do not succumb to the shifting priorities of passing generations. And this myth is closely in keen or in line with the first myth of the idea of the Constitution being old-fashioned. Because if you think it's old-fashioned, then you start to think it must change. Okay? It says, so long as the people want their human rights protected, the Constitution must remain an uncompromising, unchanging defender against all challenges. And that's just basically an elaboration on the first myth of the Constitution being old-fashioned. It's not a living document. When a politician tells you that, what they're trying to do is put some things in there that's tyrannical. Just like my shirt says here, when tyranny becomes law. They're trying to put things in it that's tyrannical, that's going to infringe on your rights. Don't fall for that. That's a myth. That is a myth. They want to put things in there that is going to bind you, enslave you, and take away your rights from you. Myth number 3. Executive orders are the law. Executive orders are the law. Now listen to this. The number of executive orders doesn't matter, but their content does. Presidents using them to make new laws defy the proper and lawful role of Congress. And to end on this note, I find that interesting that it says that's a myth. The idea that the executive orders are the law. So when the president makes an executive order, hey, that's the law. You're going to do what he says no matter what. That's a myth. Okay? That's a myth. That's not true. You have to go through certain parameters in terms of Congress to be able to do that. Now, here's the thing. As it says, what matters is the content in that executive order. Now, what I want to say in the summation of this video is when President Biden, or when he was running to become president, in an interview, Biden made this statement. And I can't remember who was interviewing him or what particular show this was, but it wasn't a deep fake video or any of that. It was a real video, and I can tell a deep fake video or a fake video from a real one. And in this interview, he stated that any president that does too many executive orders is a dictator. He gets in office and does more executive orders than all the other presidents combined. These people are playing the American people like a bunch of idiots. This is what makes me mad and angry at this kind. I've been praying. I said, God, help me not to hate these people, because it's like they plan us like a bunch of fools. He sits up here in an interview and says the exact opposite of what he actually did. He gets in office and does more executive orders than all the other presidents. So who's the dictator? Who's the dictator? Mr. Biden? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But I just wanted to end this video on those 3 myths concerning the Constitution. I hope this has been beneficial to you. Stay tuned for the second session of this. But if you guys have any comments, leave your comments in the comment section below. If you like this video, press the like button, share this video, and subscribe. God bless you all, and see you again on RCB News.